Hello, good afternoon everybody. My name is Suzanne Creever. I work at the Careers Service as a consultant, and I'm joined this afternoon by my colleague Nolene Hammond-Jones, another careers consultant. Now, I primarily support students who study biology, medicine and health degrees, but during the time I've worked at the Careers Service, I've probably worked with students across every single school and faculty. Nolene specialises in working with international students as well. So the way we're going to run this webinar, this online workshop this afternoon, is I'm going to be doing most of the presenting, and Nolene's going to be available behind the scenes, making sure it all works smoothly. I'm a little bit of a newbie when it comes to webinars like this. But it means that if you have any questions as we go along, you'll be able to ask those using the chat box to Nolene, and we can pick those up through the session. So can I just check first of all that you can hear me okay and that you can see me? If you can just type yes into the chat box, that would be really helpful. If you can all see me, then we can then start the workshop proper. So let's just try and get you all sorted before we start. Okay?
All good.
Right. Good, super. Okay, so the workshop today is all about getting your LinkedIn profile looking really professional. And let me just bear with me a second. There we go. So before we start, I just wanted to kind of highlight some things which will help you to get the best out of this online workshop. First of all, something that I discovered yesterday and is really useful. If you, on the right-hand side of the screen in your kind of webinar toolbar, there's different modes to actually view the presentation if you're using a desktop PC or a laptop. If you view the webinar in window mode, you get this new toolbar appearing at the top of the screen, which allows you to do screenshots as you go through. So if there's anything you want to capture during the presentation, if you choose that option, it will save it to your desktop and then you can access it later. We've also put in the handout section of the toolbar copies of the slides from today, and they include a link to all the resources I'm going to mention. There's also some other handouts in there to help you. There's a copy of a LinkedIn Academy workbook, which is a really comprehensive guide to using LinkedIn. And also we've uploaded a copy of a LinkedIn guide for international students as well. So please feel free to download those during the workshop this afternoon. So if you're going to start to use LinkedIn, there's two things that you need in order for it to work well. First of all, you need to have a strong profile which presents you to other LinkedIn users in a professional, effective way. The other thing that you need for LinkedIn to work well are connections. And LinkedIn is an online networking platform, and everything you do depends on your network. So if you don't have any connections in your network, you won't see that much. So what we're going to do today is concentrate on the first of those two things. We're going to show you how to create a strong profile. And to help you further along with your LinkedIn adventure or reacquaintance if you've been using LinkedIn before, later this week, my colleagues Ben and Helen are hosting an online workshop all about LinkedIn tricks and tips. And in that session, you'll find out all the interesting things you can do once you're on LinkedIn and live and active. You can use it to explore options, to find out what people who did your degree went to do next, or perhaps you are doing the master's course you're thinking about what to do next. And also they'll show you how you can use it to find job options and find work experience. Next week, this time next week, then Nolene and I will be back, and Nolene will be leading a session on how to connect and contact people using LinkedIn. There is an etiquette which it's good to follow in order to make a professional impact on people. And if you're at the stage of wanting to grow your network, then that's a really good session to tune into to find out how to do that effectively. All details about our online workshops are available on our website following this link on the slide here. On there you'll find a list of forthcoming workshops and also a link to our YouTube site where you can view workshops that have already happened. So do make the most of those resources to help you during this time. So back to the case in hand, we're going to talk about your profile. And I want to start first of all just by clarifying the difference between a LinkedIn profile and a CV, because the first time you go into LinkedIn and see a profile, it does look a bit like a CV, but there are some very important differences that once you get in your head will enable you to use LinkedIn effectively. The first is that LinkedIn, unlike a CV, is a dynamic document. Your CV is typically a snapshot of your experience for one purpose, to apply for one single job or one single course, whereas your LinkedIn profile develops as you develop, and you'll add to it and tweak areas as you go along. So it's very much something which is a living, breathing profile. The other thing that differentiates a CV from a LinkedIn profile is on LinkedIn there's no limit on length. You can make it as long as you like. Now that's not carte blanche to just write for England or wherever. It's a case of writing enough, but you've got the space there to write in more depth than you would do for a CV. With a CV, in the UK, certainly, we'll always say that you don't need a photograph. However, on LinkedIn, having a photograph of you is really important, and we'll discuss this during this workshop. LinkedIn is also very much a multimedia resource. You can include images and links to your profile to bring it to life. And unlike a CV, you're only going to have one LinkedIn profile that you'll use for everything. So it's not so much just about applying for one particular job, but it's about all the things you're interested in. And that's something people sometimes struggle with. How do I tailor my LinkedIn profile like I tailor my CV? On LinkedIn, you're allowed to be interested in lots of other different things. So you can talk about your interest in your course, interest professionally, interest in your extracurricular pursuits. So it's not tailored to one specific role, but it's all about what you can offer. So hopefully that helps you to see how a LinkedIn profile isn't quite the same thing as a CV. Now, before you start with any social media profile or a platform, it's important to get to grips with the privacy settings. And in LinkedIn, there are an awful lot of privacy settings that control what people see about you, and also the communications that you'll receive from other people out there using LinkedIn and from LinkedIn itself. Now, for the purpose of this session, I wanted to highlight some of the settings which will help you when you're building your profile. And that's on the settings and privacy menu. Now, what I'm going to do is just swap across to LinkedIn so I can show you how this works in practice. So for today, I'm actually logged into LinkedIn using our demo student profile, Sam Routledge. And when you go into LinkedIn and look at your profile, I'll just make this look a little bit bigger for you there. Up at the top of the page, you have where you access your profile, and under here, you have settings and privacy. So as you can see, loads of different options on there. But what we're going to do, first of all, I suggest you do, is when you're editing your profile, is there's an option on LinkedIn where you can decide whether or not you want to share changes to your profile as you make them. Now, as the default on LinkedIn, most things are set to public and yes. So what you want to do when you're building your profile, where you're going to be making lots of changes, is not to notify your network for every single change. Otherwise, your network will get a whole succession of emails saying that Sam has got a new skill, Sam's got a new job, Sam is becoming really annoying. Okay, so that's something just to set. So you can see on my screen, it's set to no. Okay, so that's something just to do if you are creating your profile, just so that you can get the profile looking really good before you push it out there for everybody else to see. Okay, so let me just go back to my slides and we'll carry on with the next point. As we said at the start, if you've got any questions as we go through, please feel free to pop those in the chat box. Okay, so LinkedIn is pretty much acts a bit like a business card. Once you're on LinkedIn, then potentially anybody can find you on the site if they are searching for your name. So that's why it's important, if you do get a LinkedIn profile, that you actually keep it up to date. If you apply for jobs or connect with people outside of LinkedIn, sometimes people might then look for you on LinkedIn. I know I do that as a careers advisor, and I'm sure other people do too. So what you want to do is make sure that when you're found on LinkedIn, it gives a strong impression. And this is what people will see when they go into your profile. And so it's making sure this information has good impact. So what I've done here in this image is I've kind of just snipped out Sam Routledge's top of profile page. And then a couple of things I want to just point out on this, because we're going to show you how to do it in a moment. The first thing you'll see is that Sam has a picture of him there. Now, because Sam's not a real student, I've taken the liberty of using a line drawing. What I would like you to do is use a picture of yourselves. You'll also see in the background here, this is a picture of some plant cells, which I thought looked particularly attractive. LinkedIn will give you a standard blue background, which looks okay, but a little bit dull. So you do have an opportunity here to add impact to your profile by choosing a background image which maybe fits your career interests or something that's important to you. Obviously, pictures of family, friends and dogs, not advisable. You can also see here as well, this section here we call the headline. So Sam Routledge, and you can see there that he says he's a biology student at the University of Manchester, building a career in sales and marketing. So that sounds really nice and dynamic, and it tells them something about why he is on LinkedIn and what he's about. So having a photograph on a LinkedIn profile is really important. You are 14 times more likely to get a response if you have a photograph on your profile, because it establishes you as a real person and not just a fake profile on there set up to kind of collect contacts. So putting in an appropriate photograph is really important. And there's a few bits of advice that we would suggest if you're going to do this. First of all, bear in mind that most people will look at LinkedIn on their phone. And so if you have a tiny picture of you on holiday in a field, they're not going to be able to see what you look like very well. So we suggest that you take a nice clean shot of your head and shoulders where your head is filling about 60% of the frame. Dress in professional attire for your sector, so you don't want to look like a student. Guys might wear maybe just a shirt, you don't need to put a tie on there. Don't wear any hats or anything that makes you look too casual. You can, though, to an extent, dress for your sector. So if you are doing a scientific degree, you might wear a lab coat. Any engineers, you might decide to wear a hard hat or some of the gear that you might wear on site. But again, make it look appropriate, because it is a professional networking site. For your photograph, natural lighting is best. Don't take photographs using your webcam when you get that blue cast on your screen, on your skin, because it looks really, really odd. And have a nice, clean, plain background. And importantly, it needs to look like you right now. So if you used to have a beard but don't anymore, or have changed your hairstyle, what you're aiming for is what you look like most often. So when people meet you, you look like a real person. A good thing to do to get a photograph, you don't need to go to a professional photographer. If you find a friend with a decent camera phone, find yourself a room in bright daylight with a plain background, and they'll be able to take you a really decent picture very, very quickly. So definitely get your photograph on there as soon as possible. Okay. So the other thing that we demonstrated on that picture of Sam's was his headline text. And headline text is really important within LinkedIn, and I'm going to show you why. So let me just go back to LinkedIn again, and I'll demonstrate what I mean. So if you search for anybody on LinkedIn, what happens is you get a list of people coming up, and then next to it you get some text about them. And that text there is your headline text. Now, it tends to default to whatever your most recent information is on your CV, on your LinkedIn profile. So for a lot of you, it's just going to say student at the University of Manchester. Now, you've got an opportunity here to make it a lot more dynamic, to tell people more about what you're about when they look for you on LinkedIn. So it's really important to think about editing that, and it's really easy to do. So to edit it, go into your profile and view profile. And this is the section that I snipped into the presentation. And within LinkedIn, most sections have a little kind of pen icon here. You can click on that and then you can make some amendments. This is where I changed the picture for Sam's background profile. This is where I added the image. And along here, you've got a headline here. And you can edit this to say whatever you like. Now, what I would bear in mind is you don't want it to be too long, otherwise it's going to hang off the screen when people find you in search. But you can make that a bit more specific to what you're doing now and to what you're aiming for. So a few tips to help you to think about what you might write for yours. So here's 3 examples, 3 different Sams. This might be you. You might be student at the University of Manchester. Or you could be a final year biomedical science student, hospital volunteer, student ambassador, peer mentor, or like our Sam Routledge, a biology student at Manchester, building a career in sales and marketing. So you can see there's a very big difference between student and explaining a little bit more about what you're about. And this is something which you can keep up to date depending on how you develop your experience and also how your aspirations might change as well. Okay, so the third thing which is really important to do on LinkedIn and really will make your profile look really professional is to edit your personal profile URL. Now this, if I go back into Sam's profile again, this is the URL that LinkedIn gives you for your profile. So you can see for Sam Routledge's account, it's Sam Routledge, or Samuel Routledge, so I say. Now, it could be that yours has got lots of extraneous numbers and letters at the end of it that looks a bit messy. It's really easy to change this on LinkedIn. What you do is you choose the option for Edit Public Profile and URL. And in here, you have a lot more options. And one of those options is to edit your custom URL. And you're allowed to put in anything there so long as somebody else hasn't got it already. So if you've got an unusual name, so my name, Suzanne Krieber, I'm the only one on LinkedIn, I can have that name. If you have got a name which is a little bit more kind of common, then what you might want to do is play around with it, maybe put initials in or dates. But the benefit of doing this is that when people go to your profile, it's nice and tidy, because it also gives you a portable URL for you to share your LinkedIn profile with other people. So you might include that perhaps in your email signature. What you might also do is use that on your CV as well. One of the real benefits of having a LinkedIn profile is that if you're the kind of person whose CV is really long and you find it very hard to edit it so that you don't know what to take off, you can put your LinkedIn URL on your CV, and then you might feel a bit more comfortable about taking off some experience from your CV on the basis that they can look at your CV, then go off to LinkedIn to find out everything else that wouldn't fit on. So it can work really, really well if you have got lots of experience and struggle to fit it onto a 2-page CV. So here are some suggestions for how you might, show your details. So Sam Smith is quite common, so it could be Sam Smith Manchester. You can put your initial in there. You might put a date in there. But if you play around with it, you should be able to find something which is a lot neater than the one that LinkedIn gives you automatically. Now, so those are all areas which appear on your LinkedIn profile automatically, but there's one section which you'll need to add in, and it's perhaps the most important section on LinkedIn, and that is your About Summary section. Now, you have to add this to your profile manually, and it's an important section because everybody on LinkedIn has the same profile structure. So you might be doing a master's course at Manchester University at the moment, but it always defaults to your experience first. So if you're currently working, or until the lockdown we're working, that's the job which will appear first in your profile. So having an About section allows you to introduce yourself to someone browsing your profile, to talk about things that you're interested in, what you're aspiring to, what you're passionate about. So let me show you on Sam's profile what he has on his profile here. So you can see that we have this about section here, and Sam's put a little bit of experience, information about his experience and what his aspirations might be. Now, to add an about profile section, you'll notice at the top of the page we've got this add profile section drop down, and then here there's lots of different features you can add in, including this about summary section. Now, as we said at the start, LinkedIn is a very multimedia platform. So in your summary, you can add text there, but in other areas of LinkedIn, you can also add in pictures and images too. So definitely use this to set up, you know, it's the scene about yourself. The other thing I'd say about this as well is when you're writing on LinkedIn, with CVs, we often say write on in the kind of the third person. So you talk about how you developed or achieved. In LinkedIn, you can write in the first person. You talk about what you're doing, that I'm interested in this is important to me. So you can make it a lot more kind of human sounding, more of a narrative written style within LinkedIn. And I think it reads better when you take that approach. So you can see that in what Sam has in his profile, it's written in the first person. So a really important section that you need to add into your profile. Now, when you are putting information into your profile, into your about section, there's a few things you need to bear in mind. First of all, the key thing is that when people first go into your profile, all they'll see at first are the first 3 lines of your about summary section. So you need to make sure that those are powerful and that you start with impact. But what you put in there is pretty much up to you. I would suggest you use it to highlight the experience further down your profile, maybe key projects or courses or work experience. And I'd also perhaps look at other people's profiles for inspiration to decide what approach you want to take, whether you're going to make it very long and personal or make it more succinct, depending on your own personal style. So when you've got your information at the top of your profile, what you then need to do is to think about writing about your other experience. So the first section on LinkedIn is your experience section. And experience includes all your experience. This could be part-time jobs, work experience, relevant projects. It's quite a broad category of things that you can include in this section. And the main advice here is that you need to write it as you would if you were writing a CV. So although you can write in the first person and talk about what I did, you need to write powerfully. So contextualize your experience, use action verbs. What you might want to do to start off with is copy across the information from your CV into your LinkedIn profile and then edit and adapt it so it fits with the LinkedIn profile that you've created. You can include relevant volunteering in the experience section if you like, but there's also a volunteering section that you can add to your CV, your LinkedIn profile separately as well. So my advice would be when you're building your profile is to have a look at all the sections and decide what works for you. Look at other people who are maybe in the sector you're aiming for, who have got the same kind of experience as you, and look for kind of ideas in terms of how best to present your experience on your LinkedIn profile. So if you have a look at Sam's profile again, you can see on his experience section here, he's got on here the fact he's an assistant coach at the hockey club. He's also got on here details of his experience as an intern and also his part-time job working in the restaurants. And as before, it doesn't show you all the details to start with. So again, you need to top load it with your best experience. Don't build up to your best experience. You want to start with it. It's very easy to add experience in. You just choose the add box here, and then you can put in there details of your job and the organisation. And what it does is if it recognises the name of the organisation, it will put a logo in there automatically. So if I put in here sales assistant and part-time and put in here Sainsbury's, you can see that it pops up with the company name. And if you do that, it then gives you that nice little logo on your page and means that it sort of ties into, you then kind of are in that kind of network as well. So, you know, if you do this for a big company and it doesn't give you a logo, I would first of all check your spelling, but you know, make sure you have the right one. As you can see as well, that when you go into these sections, it asks you all the way through whether you want to kind of share this or not with people. So once you've got your profile finished, if you suddenly get a great piece of work experience, you might want to push it out there just to show people what you've been up to. So I'm going to put Sainsbury's here, you put the location, and then you can put some information about what the role is here as well. Okay, so very easy to add experience to your CV. So I'm going to discard that. And so you can put a whole range of experience on there. The next section we're going to look at is education. Now, because Sam isn't a real student, we've not attached him to the University of Manchester. When you put your education in, you need to make sure you go to the right University of Manchester school, and it should give you the purple logo here. It should look a bit like that one there. Okay. There are a few rogue University of Manchester accounts kicking around out there. You need to make sure you get on the right one. But education is then your next section on your profile. So this is Sam's education section. There are two parts to it. If I go into edit, I can show you what I mean. First of all, you need to put in your degree and put it in as BSc Hons, MA, whatever your degree title is, in that kind of format, and then the subject, the field of study. Now, there are two sections to put information in. One is this here, activities and societies. This is almost like a little subheading. You can't actually format this text. You can use commas to separate the text. You can't use bullet points. What you can do is use maybe things like upright characters or little kind of icons like a dot to separate points, if you like, to make it look a bit different. Then you have your description section here, where you can write more information about your course. And again, you've got options here to upload media or links as appropriate. So LinkedIn hasn't got a spell check built in. So what we suggest is, as I said, you create all your content using Word or your preferred word processing package. And then if you use any bullet points and copy and paste it into LinkedIn, it will copy your bullet points across too. It's a very neat way of putting bullet points into your profile if that's what you want to do. The only place it doesn't work is in this activities section here, but it'll work everywhere else. So remember, no spell check on LinkedIn, so check everything carefully as you do it. Okay, so let me just nip back to the slides to make sure I've told you everything I need to tell you about this section here. So let me just nip into education. So think about what you want to add in about your education. You could list some key modules in there. And a bit like you would for your CV, think about what you want to share with readers. You might talk about some of the skills that you developed, maybe from doing course projects or extended coursework or dissertations. Using active language is important, maybe talking about group work that you've done. If you've done projects, you have a couple of different options. You can include that within your education section, but there's also an add-in I'll show you in a moment, which allows you to add in a project in the accomplishments section. So if you've done projects which aren't as relevant to your career aspirations, but you want to record them on your LinkedIn profile, you might add them as a project. If that project is really relevant to what you want to do, you might include that under your experience section. So again, you've got that flexibility to kind of place your experience where you feel it's going to have most impact within your profile. But getting that education section up to date is really important. So again, maybe start by copying stuff from your CV and then editing it within LinkedIn. So there are other sections on LinkedIn that you might want to think about including, and an important one is putting in skills. Now, the way that LinkedIn works is that some employers get access to something called LinkedIn Recruiter, and that allows them to search the whole database of LinkedIn profiles. And often when employers are searching for candidates, they'll look for key skills. So it's important in your profile you include skills that you have in order to draw recruiters in to look for your profile. Now, let me show you on Sam's profile how you would add skills into your profile. So back to Sam again here. So further down on Sam's profile, there's a section called skills and endorsements. If this isn't visible on your profile, you might need to add it in using this little drop down here. And what it allows you to do is to add in skills that you can offer a recruiter. And I want you to do this as comprehensively as possible. So you can add in there any kind of IT packages that you might be able to use, any data handling software, any laboratory skills and techniques that you might want to include in there. Sam is a biologist but not really interested in lab work, so he's not put any lab techniques in there and just decided to go for laboratory skills. If by contrast, Sam wanted to work within a laboratory setting, then Sam would be encouraged, certainly by us, to include all his techniques. So his gel electrophoresis, his PCR, any techniques that he's gained during university, because that is the kind of techniques that employers will be searching for. What I also want you to do is when you're talking about kind of skills which are more generic, is to be specific. So I don't want you to put in there communication skills because that is just all a bit broad. Be specific. In what way? Is it presentation skills? Is it report writing? Is it persuasion? Maybe you've got a part-time job working in sales. That would be, you know, an absolute good skill to include for that kind of work. But work at building that section up as much as possible. Now, when you start to have skills in your profile, what can happen is that some people can endorse you for those skills as well. So to give you an example of this, I'm going to look at the profile of one of our graduates, Chris James. So Chris is a graduate who I know really well. And if we look on his profile down here, you can see that he has quite a comprehensive skills and endorsements skills section. And what's happened is that for some skills, he's been endorsed by other people. So what someone can do is say, yes, I think Chris is really good at team working, has got good skills in research, good skills in digital marketing. So these are all people who've endorsed him for those skills. So the way having endorsement for skills is important because it makes you visible to recruiters, but obviously you need to make sure the credibility of who is endorsing you. So before you go out there and start endorsing all your friends, obviously a academic member of staff or a manager is going to have more impact than just an everyday student. However, if that student works with you on a society and has seen you in action and knows that you're a strong performer in that area, then that endorsement carries some weight. So think about how you might want to use this in your profile. So transferable skills, be specific. So not communication, think of other specific communication words. And for specialist skills, you can really go to town. My top tip is to look for the skills asked for by employers in roles that interest you. And maybe look at the skills which are on profiles of people doing the job that interests you. And if you share those skills, put them on your profile as well to enable you to be found. So we mentioned there briefly about having endorsements for skills, and there are different ways that people can give you a little bit of a highlight or a recommendation on your profile. So through endorsing a skill, but also offering a recommendation. So recommendations are a bit like someone offering you a testimonial. And what you might want to do is solicit these from people who you might have worked with in the past. So if you went on placement, maybe you're a placement supervisor, if there are managers where you work who are on LinkedIn. And what it does, again, it gives your profile a little bit more kudos. So somebody who is a real person sharing what they think about you as an individual. And what I'll do is I'll show you some recommendations which are on Chris's profile so you can see how it works in practice. So here are some recommendations on Chris's profile. So you can see here that one of the lecturers within his school gave him an endorsement for when he was working as the intern, and a member of academic staff when Chris was working as a student ambassador for the school, she gave him a recommendation as well. So again, these add value to your profile, and you can choose to kind of ask people to give you these as well. You'll find a lot more information on recommendations on our website, so I'm not going to say anything more about it now, but certainly worth looking at for your profile. So back to the slide deck. So other things you can do, so those are the main sections on LinkedIn: your education, your experience, your skills, but there are other things you can do to add in your accomplishments and your experience onto your profile using that kind of little blue drop down box section. And I'm going to show you a couple of these now, just in case you want to take advantage of them. I mentioned the projects one earlier, and I think this is a really neat little tool to help to show some of the experience that you've gained, maybe during your degree, but also maybe through activities that you've done as a student or extracurricular activities outside university. You can also add in accomplishments, things like languages, any honours and awards that you've received, any courses or publications. There's really lots of options there depending on your level of experience. So I'm just going to nip across to Chris's profile again, because I want to show you ways you might want to use accomplishments. So honours and awards might go on here. So if you've been involved in the Stellify programme or the Manchester Leadership, you might want to add this on here. You can also add in here language skills that you might have, and then you can state your proficiency. This is the project section here. So what Chris has done is listed some of the projects he did when he was a student. So he's mentioned in here a literature review he did in his second year and his final year research project. Now, projects don't actually appear next to where you actually did it on your LinkedIn profile. So it's really important that you state in the detail which experience it relates to. And then what you might want to do is, if you're going to do this as in your profile, you can talk maybe briefly about projects that you've worked on, and then maybe see projects below for more detail. So again, this could be a way to maybe showcase some of the experience that you have. There's a section here where you can put in publications, and that could be academic publications if you've got some of those under your belt, but maybe you've been published in things like Mancunian or in another student publication. You might want to mention that there. So as you can see, you can really use this section to kind of illustrate the kind of things that you can offer as an individual. So definitely think about how you can use these within your own profile. Okay. So something I just wanted to highlight to you, because I know that today we have international students who've tuned in, and it might be that you created your profile a little while ago in your kind of native language. It's possible on LinkedIn to have profiles in different languages. What it isn't possible to do is have more than one profile. So what you need to do, if you were in that situation, is consider adding a profile in a second language to your own profile. And it's really straightforward to do this. And that will really make your profile more accessible to different employers in different countries that you want to target. You need to remember with this that any updates you make to your primary language, you need to make changes to your secondary language profiles too, just to keep it up to date. And translations aren't done for you, you need to do it yourself. So let me show you how you would do that by going back into Sam's profile, so you know how to do this for yourself. So let me just go back to Sam's profile here, and under here, under the About Me section, you've got language here, and okay, and from this section here, right, let me just get my head around this again. It wouldn't be a webinar with me if we didn't have a little blip halfway through. So let me just remind myself how to do it. Okay, so let me just find my my screen. Oh, it's all gone to pot. You can see it's live. Okay, so view profile. So you go to view profile and add profile section in another language. So let me go back into Sam's profile again. Okay, so view profile, and then you've got an idea here. There we are, add profile in a different language here. So that allows you to choose the profile the profile language that you want to add in there as well. Okay, so very straightforward to do, and I'll definitely consider doing that if you are in that situation of having profiles in more than one language. So thank you for bearing with me during that little blip. Okie doke. So definitely, if you want to find out more about how you can use LinkedIn as an international student, we have actually downloaded a handout into that you can download, which gives you other tips for using it if you're looking to job hunt internationally or you are an international student. Okay, the most important message about LinkedIn though is once you get in there and once you've got your profile, it's so important you keep it up to date. As I said, when you're applying for jobs, employers are nosy, they'll Google you, they might find your LinkedIn profile, and it's really nice if your LinkedIn profile looks as up to date as the CV that you sent them. So add in new skills and experiences as you gain them. Visiting LinkedIn frequently tags you as being a frequent user of LinkedIn, which means that you're more likely to appear in searches. So it's in your best interest to do it anyway, A, to keep your information up to date, and B, to increase your visibility and profile on LinkedIn. The second thing I would suggest is to update your location so it reflects where you are now. So again, if you created your location in your home country and now in Manchester, you might want to change that location to Manchester. Conversely, if you graduated and now are living somewhere else apart from Manchester, update your location so it's up to date. And also make use of that headline and keep that headline up to date so that when people look at your profile, it looks as fresh now as it did when you first created it. So finally, some useful resources that you can use to develop your profile further. We have lots of information and resources on our website to explore. Definitely look at other people's LinkedIn profiles to get some inspiration. And you can also get feedback on your LinkedIn profile via the careers service. If you go onto our website, you can chat with us through the chat box from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And also careers consultants like me will give feedback on LinkedIn profiles during appointments sometimes as well. LinkedIn also has its own LinkedIn learning course for students as well, if you wanted to maybe spend a little bit more time getting used to how it works. And a final reminder really that this is the first of a number of workshops that we're running in May on how to use LinkedIn. So on Thursday you can tune in and listen to Helen and Ben about how to use the different tricks and tips within LinkedIn. All these are recorded as well, like the webinar today. And next week you can join us and find out more about connecting and contacting etiquette in LinkedIn. So thanks for listening this afternoon. I hope you found it useful. We now have an opportunity, if you have any questions that you want to ask, if you want to add those through the chat box, then that would be really helpful. So I'm going to stop screen sharing now. Hello again, world. Do we have any questions that you want to ask while you've got the pair of us here?
So we have had a couple of questions come in while you were presenting. So one of them is around copying the content of your CV into your LinkedIn profile. Would that be recommended?
I think that is a good way to start, because hopefully you've spent a lot of time getting your CV content looking really good. And if you copy it across into LinkedIn, first of all, you know that you're copying in some text which hopefully you've checked and formatted and checked the grammar, so it's good quality content. The other thing I'd say is, well, I've said this I think in the presentation already, there's no spell check or grammar check or anything in LinkedIn at all. It's very easy to make a spelling mistake, and I speak from experience here. If you copy across from Word, it allows you to do all your spell checking first, but also, as I said, it keeps some formatting, including bullet points. So as long as the bullet points aren't too weird and wacky, you can be able to copy across neat formatted text very quickly into your profile. So I definitely say that's a great place to start, but don't just leave it like your CV. The whole point of LinkedIn, it's a richer resource, so you really want to kind of develop it a little bit more.
And another question around including your GPA in your LinkedIn education section.
Okay. if you have got, I think when you put in your any kind of educational scores into any kind of document like a CV or a LinkedIn profile, I think it's important that you express it in the way it was awarded, because most organisations and universities are able to understand what that GPA means. And if you've got some strong marks there, they're going to differentiate you from other people. What would you say, LinkedIn, Nolene?
It depends on the market as well that you're kind of concentrating your job search in. So if GPA is a common qualification in your job market, such as America, for instance, then yeah, include it in. I would always say include it in regardless, but if you are looking at, say, the UK market, where GPA isn't a commonly recognized qualification in terms of an employer understanding what that would translate to, you might just want to put the equivalent percentage or something along those lines so it does translate a little bit more. So, you know, if your average percentage was around 75%, you could just say this equates to getting 75% across the board, something like that, just so an employer, if he does glance at it, isn't familiar with GPA, they can recognize it.
Okay.
Another student has come in and said that with modules, should they include future modules? So modules they've not yet taken but plan to take in their next academic year. Would that be a good idea, or should they wait?
I think definitely. I work with students who are applying for industrial placements, and people, if you're applying for a placement, and if you're applying for a graduate job, employers want to know what you will have done by the time you start working for them. And also, as you get further on in your degree, you start to tailor your content a lot more. And so it's important to see what you're working on now. They'll know from your previous marks what level you're working at. So I definitely put, and you can put in there that modules this year include. And again, you can refresh that as you go along. So at the start of the year, you might say that your project's going to be on topic X. And then further on, you can talk a little bit more about your strategies for doing that kind of project, maybe some of the research that you've done, if you've got to submit a literature review, what mark you got. So again, keeping it up to date as you go along is really important. So once you start to get your grades, slap your grades on there. You don't have to list every single module, a bit like a CV, because it's just going to be too long. Prioritise it on the ones which are most recent, most relevant, where you've got the best grades. So again, you're picking and choosing what content you want to share.
Fantastic. Another student has asked if they don't have recommendations on their profile, does that put them at a disadvantage or a major disadvantage?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I think if you're able to solicit them, then fantastic, go for that. But it's not something which is going to put you at a disadvantage if you don't have them. What I would say though is that if you think there might be somebody somewhere who might be happy to give you a recommendation, who is pleased about the work that you've done. More people are on LinkedIn these days. The population has just grown and growing, and I guess it's probably grown even more over the last few weeks when we've all been kind of trapped in our homes and at our desks. So, you know, it's worth thinking if there's someone who you might want to approach for recommendation, but I have one on mine and I have it there really as an illustration. But depending on what experience you've got, if you've had a really good placement or have got that prior experience before university, or it's something which really I would consider.
Right. And then a really good question's come in about PhD. So where would you place a PhD? Would it be better in experience or education?
I would perhaps put it in both places because but I would definitely put it under experience, because ultimately, a PhD is a 3-year exercise in project management, and that allows you there, depending on the topic of your PhD and what you're aiming for to do next, to talk about the content of your PhD, the areas that you're researching, the techniques you're developing, or if you're looking to do something different after your PhD, you can talk about the project management aspects of that process as well. So your PhD is a qualification, but also it's a very important source of work experience, and some employers will view that as relevant work experience. So I will put it in both places.
And how, when a student is kind of reflecting on their school experience, would it be advisable to put in school achievements and other things related to school, or would you limit that at degree level?
So it's school as in pre-university?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Some people, I've seen students who put in their kind of A-level results in there, which you can do, but really you don't have to. I would maybe consider doing that if you're aiming for a sector which A-level results are to start with your most recent experience. So if you've started to build experience which is more along the lines of your new career direction, then that's going to appear at the top of the profile anyway. But maybe look at your other experience and almost like write it in the context of the job you're aiming for. So say if you worked in retail before, being able to use the till doesn't mean anything, but talk about the insight you got from working in retailing in terms of upselling, about merchandising, about stock control, about building relationships with customers, about brand awareness, about training. So twisting it, so it's about, and for some very early experience, you might not even want to put it on at all or make it very, very concise. So it's again expanding the sections which are most relevant and most impactful and shrinking down the early career stuff which isn't as relevant.
And maybe just highlight those skills rather than tasks.
Yeah. And the thing is, a LinkedIn profile, it can be as long as you like. And, you know, so don't worry about it being long. It just shows how much you've got to offer. So, you know, that's
more searchable. Another question's come in around if you've published a paper as part of a conference, would you consider that as a publication, even though it was only published in a conference booklet? Would you put that in the publication section, or would you recommend an article maybe, or where would you put that?
Oh, that's a good question. What I might do, if someone asked me that in guidance, is I'd go and have a look at some profiles of some postdocs and some PhD students and maybe some academic stuff and see what they put in there. Because a lot of the categories on LinkedIn are very broad. It's not specifically publications that have been printed in a learned journal. So Chris in his profile included some copy that he wrote for an in-house newsletter. So as long as you make it clear the context in which you were published, whether it was in a conference brochure, whether it was in a publication, and are upfront about it, then I think you can put anything in that section there. It's not an academic platform purely, it's a platform for all people in all different work areas. Would you agree with that, Naomi?
I do agree with that. I think getting inspiration from others' profiles is a really good way of figuring out how maybe best to place yourself in comparison. And you can do that using the alumni search, and that's another session, and we'll go into that, and you'll have all that information. So do the email that we sent out to you advertising the 3 sessions, so today's, Thursdays and Tuesday next week, has in there the link to all the recordings, where you'll find the recordings, and it takes 2 to 3 days for a recording to be uploaded. It also has the information about what each session will cover. And we will try to include documentation so that you can access all that information. So don't worry if you've missed anything, it has been recorded. Gaps. So this is something we get asked a lot. How would you address even a long gap in employment history on LinkedIn?
To be honest, I don't really notice gaps in the same way that you would with a CV. I don't think it's as important, because the way that LinkedIn is, you've got different sections of different things. So gaps actually are more hidden on LinkedIn than they would be on a printed 2-page document where they will really stand out. So I wouldn't get hung up on that if you've taken a career break or there's other reasons that there's a gap in your CV. I'd just focus on where you have got experience, really making the most of it, because that's what employers want to know. What can you do? So, you know, if you have got gaps in your experience, you're not quite sure how to disclose it, you know, that might be affecting other applications that you're making anyway. You can always come and, well, first of all, on our website, we have a section about disclosure you might want to look at, to think about how you might want to share things with a recruiter, and you can also talk to careers consultants confidentially. And